Gautam Buddha was called Shakyamuni, the sage of the Shakyas. My question is, were the Shakyas and the Sakas, the Scythians, the same? Was Gautam Buddha a Scythian? That's an interesting question. So even I used to believe, 10 years ago or so, that the Shakyas and the Sakas or the Shakas were the same. It may not be the case. So who were the Scythians, the Sakas or the Shakas? These were Indian origin nomadic people. So in the old days, in the days of the Vedas, in the Puranas, in the Vedic age, there were multiple waves of migration out of India to the west, to the north and the west. And the people who migrated out of India went and settled down in Persia, to the west of Persia, and all across Central Asia. And after a few years, after a few decades, maybe a couple of centuries, they kind of gave up some of the values and some of the traditions of India. So they no longer followed the Vedic lifestyle properly. So that's why they were given the name of mlechas. But they were still Indian origin people. The entirety of Central Asia was Indian origin. You still find ruined stupas and ruined temples all across Central Asia, everywhere. You even find ruins of Hindu temples in Georgia and Armenia and places like that in the Caucasus region, and there must be many more. So the whole of Central Asia was was Indian, and you had these nomadic people who were of Indian origin. We know what they looked like based on their DNA analysis. They had light brown skin, brown eyes, and dark hair, and they were reasonably tall. So these were known as the Scythians. The Scythians ruled the Central Asian steppe region. Right, they were nomads and they were very powerful warriors, but they did not stay in one place for long. They were nomads. So these were the Scythians, and eventually, about 2,000 years ago, they reintroduced themselves into India. They conquered parts of northern and western India, and they assimilated very harmoniously within the Indian population because they essentially were the same people, the same culture. There was no significant difference between Indians and Scythians genetically or culturally. So the assimilation was very harmonious. And you had many great Scythian kings in Western India. Rudra Daman, Rudra, forget all the names, but you had these great Mahakshatrapas, especially in Western India, in Gujarat, Saurashtra, etc. They controlled India's great ports that did all the trade with Rome, etc., Egypt, and so on. So these were the Scythians, Indo-Scythians, and the Central Asian Scythians, the same people. One could also consider the Kushans to be the easternmost Scythians. So these guys, the Scythians, re-entered India about 2,200 or so years before today, approximately. Now, Gautam Buddha, according to conventional historiography, according to the conventional chronology of India, of India's history, he lived about 2,500 years before today, around 500 BC, thereabouts. Uh, that's what the official consensus is. So if he lived in 500 BC approximately, that would predate the time of the Scythian reintroduction into India by about 3 centuries, right? Because during the Mauryan era, or before the Mauryan dynasty, before the Mauryas, you had the Nanda dynasty, right? During the time of the Nanda dynasty, there was no significant intrusion of Scythians into India, none whatsoever, almost, right? And so, therefore, it is unlikely that Gautam Buddha, Siddhartha Gautam, the prince of the Shakya people, would have been a Scythian. So maybe it's just a coincidence that you had a clan of people or a community of people, Kshatriyas, warriors, who were called the Shakya people, and to whom Gautam Buddha belonged. So most likely, I would say that the Shakyas of northern India, present day Nepal and Bihar, etc., most likely they were not Scythians, right? So that's what I can conclude based on the chronology and all of this historical background. So most likely Gautam Buddha was not a Scythian. He was a northern Indian Kshatriya from a princely, from an aristocratic royal family.